Okay, in this tutorial we're going to look at actually bringing in bringing in images that we can use as decals essentially. So what I've done is I've gone online and I've just saved this sign and I've brought this into Substance Painter. The way that we would do that, just find this. I have my folder here. I can just drag and drop it into the library. And then what we can do is we can just define this. So if I go in, I can basically tell this what I want it to be. So in this case, this would be a texture. We can also import this into different things. So we could just bring it to the current session. We can put it onto the shelf, or we can put it into anything that is kind of using this project template, the Unreal Engine 4 template. Now I've brought this in, so I'm just going to cancel this for now. So this is in here, okay? And it'll show up in my textures folder. And to use this, I'm just going to create a standard layer. Let's go into the materials, and I'm just going to use color, roughness, and metal. Just set the roughness so this has no shininess on it. Set it so it's not metallic. And then in the base color, we can just drag and drop. So if we just get rid of that, we can just drag and drop that onto the base color, and then we can just use this to paint on if we need to. Okay, you might find, just don't do that. You might find if you have a standard brush, go back into this, that obviously it has the alpha stamp around that, so I can always use a square alpha, or just go into my brush and just get rid of this alpha. And there we have the sign. But I just tone this down. The problem with this is the aspect ratio. So if I go back to this, you can see this is a longer sign, not as wide. This one that I'm using is square. It's actually squashing this down. And that is because Substance Painter will only bring in 1-to-1 ratio images. So just square images. So what we need to do is we need to actually manipulate this in Photoshop first of all. Okay. So here we are in Photoshop, and I'm going to do a couple of things. Let's just unlock this layer. I'm going to do this very quickly. I'm just going to use a magic wand because we don't really want these white corners. So let's just delete those. Not the best way to do it, but that'll do for now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I will just go into the canvas size. Let's just bring this over. I'm going to look at this in terms of pixels. So what I'll do is I'll set this to width and height, so 1280 by 1280, just to match this up. I'll anchor this in the middle, and then I'm just going to click OK. And this is going to put this in the middle now, but now we're using a square ratio around this, so we're using a 1-to-1 ratio. So that's done. Let me just save this out. So I'm going to save this into my same folder. I'm going to use a PNG. Call this shock warning. And save that. Okay. So back into Substance Painter. And what I can do is, let me just drag my folder over again. So I now have my PNG version of this. Let's drag and drop this in. And again, let's just set this to be a texture. Let's just put this in this current session and import. So we have this with our transparent edges. So I'm going to drag this in. So let me just go back to my material. Okay. And now you can see that that is the correct aspect ratio. So now I can paint that in. I'm not sure if that's got a complete transparency on there. It should have. Yep. Let's check my brush. Okay, we've got the flow on. Okay, that's fine. It may just be because we've got the because we're using the roughness on there, so it's actually changing the roughness of the whole area of that. So there we go. Okay. So that's the right aspect ratio now. We can also use a different way to get this on as well as using the brush. We can use our projection. So if we just go into our projection option on this, and within here, drag this in again. Should we use in color? There we go. And if I press S down, I can just resize this and move this around. If I press S and keep it pressed down, notice over here it tells us all our options for this. So S plus the right button is a zoom. S plus Shift plus S plus left is snap, stencil, snap, rotate. S left button, stencil, rotate, and S middle, stencil, pan. So we could go into that. Now if we are doing that with a stencil, then what it's better to do in Photoshop is actually have this with a bit of a gap around it. If I was to paint over this right now, and let's just drag this stencil over somewhere else. Resize this. So if I was to start painting this in, I would be painting it in, but when I get to the edge of that, we're going to start painting another variation, another version of that in there, which is okay. We've got something like a tiling texture. But if we wanted to paint something like a sign in, just having a bit of a gap around that would work. Okay. Go back to my brush. So a couple of different ways of bringing that in. But the main thing is actually getting the aspect ratio right. So as long as you have a square image, whatever is inside that will be painted on, and it will be the correct proportions.